Yo people, welcome back to another review. Today is the whole season of Echo, and overall the show was better than I expected, except I didn't expect anything. In the grand scheme of things, I'd say this show was better than shows like Miss Marvel, Secret Invasion and She-Hulk, but it just felt like another copy and paste formula of a story for a Disney Plus show. At this point, you know the formula of the script, and you can just make a list and start ticking it off as the show goes along. Okay, someone's gonna betray the good characters, tick. Expect the big fight to contain all the main characters and if possible is split into 2 fights, tick. Make sure the male characters are complete idiots and losers, and by doing this, you make the female characters look good. Tick. By the way, that's not how storytelling works, but I guess Marvel still hasn't learned their lessons after 4 years. I'll start with the negatives, and the first one is the overall story. All we need to know from this show is that Echo had a family, which was obvious, her ancestors, from which she gets powers, which the powers end up being cringe, and she gets a new suit. The Kingpin interactions were good, and I'll talk about those later in the positive part. But the overall story between Kingpin and Echo didn't really advance. It got fleshed out a little bit, but it was done by reflecting on the past, which a lot of the show was about. I would have rather seen this season just be a prequel show because all the good stories were related to the flashbacks. They literally could have done episode 1 on the family life for Echo and the accident that caused the deaths, then the family conflict which leads to the dad and Maya having to leave, then Maya struggling in the day-to-day because she's deaf, and seeing how Kingpin and her father really deal with it, how they raise her, and kind of seeing that negative dark side from this character, which they imply a lot that she has. You can even be ambitious and do like a whole world building for New York and show where Kingpin and Echo were during different MCU events, tying the whole show to the MCU. Then, at the end, you can show the little tie-in to the Hawkeye show as they did. Literally, the flashbacks could have been fleshed out into a 4 or 5 episode prequel, and I think that would have been way better than the actual story that we got for the present day stuff. Another negative was the usual MCU extreme feminist messaging. Most characters that were male were either villains, losers, idiots, comic relief, or they would just bow down to the female character because the script says so. For example, one of the men was called Biscuits and he was an idiot. The granddad gets shat on by the grandma at the beginning before she gets humbled, which only happens because of another female character. There's a guy called Vicky who betrays Henry and Echo. Even the whole ancestors thing, it was only ever referring to the female characters. The end fight is only the chosen one female ancestors through different generations that fight with Echo, which was extremely cringe, especially since they're talking about culture, heritage, and family throughout the whole show. If that was the true intention of the show, then why not have men involved too? It would have felt more like she really had the power of her ancestors if you saw men, women, children helping, but whatever. I also didn't like how she was a direct descendant of the main Native American that supposedly saved the entire race from that cave, who was obviously female. This point alone ruined the show a lot for me, and Echo also somehow manages to pass on her powers to her cousin and her grandma in order to take out about 12 of Kingpin's henchmen, which again is the same cringe, unrealistic thing that they do when a small skinny female ends up defeating fully grown men who are fully armed. It just becomes laughable and it takes you out of the scene. Lastly, I want to talk about Echo's new suit, and I get what they were going for, but it looked very gimmicky. And the fact they unveiled that new suit at the Native American festival didn't do any favors because it looks like it just belongs in that environment and it doesn't belong anywhere else. So when they were at the warehouse or wherever doing the main fight, it just looked a bit weird. But it will definitely take some time getting used to it to see that suit in cities and in other environments. Anyways, let's move on to the good stuff. And I want to give credit to the actress who plays Echo. She does a pretty good job. She's a pretty likable character as well. I like that her character is darker in general since she was little, since she was raised by her father and Kingpin who are criminals. I look at her cousin Bonnie. For me, that's how Maya would have turned out if her mum never died, if her grandma didn't ruin the rest of the family. She would have lived a pretty good life, but with how things turned out, she became something completely different and a character with flaws. My next point is, there was that scene before she wears the suit and she talks to her mum, and I'd say the overall message of that was understandable, but because it was a full do it for your ancestors, do it for your family, but we've literally just been force-fed the whole women are amazing, only women are the best throughout the generations, so it kind of contradicts the message. They literally do this empowering thing so much that I can't tell when they're being genuine and when it actually is good for the storyline and when they're forcing it. But the overall message is what I'm praising about this moment. I'd say it's one of the genuine ones, but it's just unfortunate what it's tied to and what's happened in the story. I liked how in the fight scenes they would make everything quiet, so we get everything from Echo's perspective, kind of like how they do it in the Daredevil show over on Netflix. On top of that, I think the blood and the maturity aspect added a different element and made the fights at least have a more serious tone. Kingpin didn't really develop much as a character, but he stole the show when he'd show up on screen, especially the performance from the actor. It's crazy to think that he was looking after Maya while the Avengers are active in 2012 and even before they became the Avengers. So again, if we'd have got that prequel show where it ties into more of the events, I think it would have been cool. Kingpin got made to look strong in terms of his presence in the world and his connections, how easily he moves about, how unpredictable he is as a character, but his physical strength, not so much, for a second MCU show in a row. I also think that Hammer callback to the Daredevil show was very well done. Also, I just want to mention quickly the technology with the whole contact lens thing that he gives Echo and it creates the virtual sign language. I think that was a pretty cool invention to see. I think episode 4 was the best because of the Kingpin stuff, but I also liked the first half of episode 1 when they showed us Maya's life, the parents, the culture, how they connected it to the Hawkeye show. Lastly, the end credit. It looks very promising for Kingpin. They're trying to build him up as this big threat even though he's lost like 4 encounters now, which is kind of stupid. But they're basically teasing Kingpin as the future mayor of New York, just like in the comics, which is good because we got rumors about Spider-Man 4 having Kingpin as the mayor, with Kingpin trying to make the heroes such as Spider-Man and Daredevil look like the villains of the city. So that would be an interesting dynamic going forward. Overall, I think I'd give this show a 5 out of 10, and this may be me being a bit more generous. It didn't really do anything great, and it wasn't down bad horrendous like She-Hulk. Maybe because I've seen She-Hulk, I'm giving this a bit higher, but there are worse MCU shows out there. But again, they need to stop using this same formula for all the shows, stop having limited episodes. But yeah, as always, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, drop a like on the video if you enjoyed, sub to the channel if you haven't already, and if you're new around here, thank you for your time and have a great rest of your day.